Welcome to Solutions with Sagamore, a podcast produced by the Sagamore Institute that features solution-oriented conversations about key issues facing communities throughout Indiana, the United States, and the world. I'm your host, Tim Swearens. In this episode, Sagamore Fellow Alan Dowd discusses with former U.S. Senator Dan Coats and his wife, Marsha, their lifetime of public service, as well as their new book, From Generation to Generation. Alan, will you introduce the Senator and Marsha to our listeners?
I will, and thank you, Tim. Thanks for your help leading this and coordinating this. I think it's important to give a little bit deeper background than you might normally get, because I don't know if everybody knows all the things that both of these great Americans and great Hoosiers have done. So
Quite a great list.
It is. So I'll try to condense it, but I want to give it a little bit of a thumbnail. Marsha and Dan Coats met at Wheaton College in 1963 and were married in 1965. They have 3 kids, 10 grandkids, and 2 great-grandkids. Marsha earned her bachelor's degree in education at Wheaton, went on to serve as a middle school teacher in Illinois, Indiana, and Virginia. Before focusing on being a mom and homemaker, she later earned a master's degree in clinical counseling from Johns Hopkins. She served on the board of Psychiatric Rehabilitation Services of Northern Virginia, worked as a family counselor with the Office of the United States Senate Chaplain, and served as a national committee woman to the Republican National Committee. She was honored with the U.S. Army's Commander's Award for Public Service for her work supporting soldiers and their families serving in Germany, and by the State Department for her work as a driving force behind Mission Germany's public diplomacy program. After earning a bachelor's degree in political science from Wheaton, and we'll hear a little bit more about how Dan chose political science in a few minutes, Dan received a law degree from IU and then worked in urban development and insurance before serving as director of Congressman Dan Quayle's district staff, and then winning his own House seat in 1980. Dan represented Northeast Indiana in the U.S. House of Representatives from 81 to 88, and then served in the U.S. Senate from 89 to 99. He was a member of several committees, including Senate Armed Services, Select Committee on Intelligence, Labor and Human Resources. He also chaired the influential Joint Economic Committee. During that decade in the Senate, Dan crafted a collection of family-strengthening reforms known as the Project for American Renewal. The Senate even renamed legislation focused on community development, children's health, and education, the Coats Act, near the end of Dan's career in the Senate. Dan was committed to term limits, so he retired from the Senate in 1999, only to be called back into public service as ambassador to Germany, where he served from 2001 to 2005. He was reelected to the Senate in 2010, serving again from 2011 to 2017. And then yet again, he was called back into public service after a second retirement, this time as Director of National Intelligence. So with that background, I wanted to join Tim in welcoming you to Solutions with Sagamore. The new book that you've written is called From Generation to Generation. For our listeners, it's available at Amazon. The easiest way to access it is to just search for Dan Coats or for From Generation to Generation. It'll come right up. The book is more than a political memoir. It's really a reminder that public service is a noble calling, something that these two have lived and proved throughout their life. That service isn't limited to elective office, that service is part of citizenship in America, and that every generation and every American is called to serve in some way. Dan and Marsha, you challenge, I think, a new generation of Americans to answer that call with their time, with their resources, with their gifts, and to help their neighbors in this book. And that's something you've lived through your life. So, Dan, let's start with you. What spurred you or led you to tackle this book project and write this book?
Well, people would talk to us and say, you've had quite an interesting career. How did all this come to you? And we would try to tell them we really didn't plan anything. We wanted to put our career into God's hands, but God would open doors for us. But Marsha and I had committed our lives to the Lord. Chuck Colson help with that in terms of serving what the Lord would lead us to do. Instead of our projecting, here's what we want to do, or here's what we're going to do, we would say, Lord, what did you want us to do? And doors would open for us to say, yes, I'll go, we'll go, Lord. We never thought we'd do this. Doors would open. Sometimes doors would shut. Let me tell you one story. At Wheaton College, I signed up for pre-med. Wheaton has a really tough career. Let me say this. To get through that, just about 98% of the people who signed up for a pre-med curriculum would be accepted to be a doctor's, to go forward, to medicine. At that particular time, I was playing on the soccer team. I was captain of the soccer team. We had a lot of trips that we would take, and so I really put a lot of effort in that, but not enough effort in organic chemistry. That's the make or break here for going to med school. So my sophomore year, I got something in the post box by my professor, Bernie Nelson, of organic chemistry. And he said, come over and talk to me. He said, Dan, he said, we appreciate what you're contributing to Wheaton here on the sporting field.
You were a soccer player.
Soccer player, and played tennis
right.
one of the years. And he said, as you know, getting through this organic chemistry is the step you have to do. Now, every once in a while, we get somebody who can do the other sports and do the other. And I called you over because you're not that person. That turned all the way over to political science as a career,
right.
But not as a career. Just to get through. I thought I'd go to grad school and so forth.
Right.
Almost did, but Uncle Sam called me and said he wanted an Army
right.
uniform instead of going to a grad school. So that was a door that closed to provided many other doors that were opening, and Marsha and I tried to see that's where God wants to plant us. And it ended up with an extraordinary career, very unusual. So,
But something you didn't plan and the doors you didn't open.
Exactly.
Right.
The medical field's loss was our state and nation's gains.
There's a quote in the book, Tim, where Marsha says, not only was it the nation's gain, but Marsha says many lives were saved that day.
That's right.
Over to you, Marsha. Dan talks about open doors and following God's lead, and together you did that. But I wanted to ask you, I think a lot of times, Tim and I know this as writers, sometimes the article or the piece flows from the title. Sometimes it comes after the fact. But in this case, you've told me that the title was important to you. And could you share with us what From Generation to Generation meant to you and why you chose that title? Because I think it's a powerful one.
Well, at the time that we began writing the book, I was slogging through the first 5 books of the Old Testament because I have never read that part of the Bible in its entirety, and I thought I should before while I'm still on earth here, get it done. And it hit me as I was reading that the generations were very, very important in the history of the Jewish people, and they would talk about passing on the law and the rules for living their life from one generation to the next. So-and-so begat so-and-so, begat so-and-so. And as a family systems therapist, I was most impressed of all the courses I took at Johns Hopkins with a professor who taught family counseling, family systems counseling, which is a branch that views any kind of problem in the family as not just an individual problem, but a family problem, because one person affects the other dramatically. And it was my own experience that my grandparents left a strong impression on me, my parents even more so. And I recognize as a mother, grandmother, and now a great-grandmother, that for better or for worse, we left an imprint on our children. Mm-hmm. Now they are all parents. Mm-hmm. So looking at it from the family perspective, I wanted our children and our future generations that will come long after we're long gone to say, all right, this is what was important to these two people. And that's why that title came to my mind.
It's great. And that's a great explanation and background on that. And I think it comes through in the book, and I think the readers will see that you really are, you do impart some amazing wisdom and life lessons of this life. Dan's great phrase, unplanned, unpredictable life.
And it's not that we did it all correctly. I mean, there are no perfect parents or perfect husbands or wives, but I believe we did the best we could, and I believe my parents did the same. So to me, that's what that title means. But you could view it from a political perspective, that politically we evolve over the generations, socially, spiritually, in many different ways.
Culturally, any number of ways, right? Well, let's stick with you on the next question. You both talk in the book about, and Dan mentioned him a moment ago, open doors, and sometimes shut doors, but open doors is a big theme that seems to come in the book. Could you share with us what it felt like on your end? I think it may even be that you met candidate Quayle before Dan did, but could you share with us what it felt like to walk through that first open door to elective office? Because it comes through in the book. You're a team. You never went into any of these things without being together, shoulder to shoulder. But could you share with us what that was like, and maybe meeting candidate Quayle? You had a pretty strong sense about him right away, a little bit. So share with us that, Marsha.
Okay. Well, I did go to a neighborhood coffee, and that's how Dan Quayle was drumming up support in Fort Wayne. He was from Huntington, Indiana, and a neighbor invited me to come to a coffee and hear him speak, so I did, and I was very impressed with him. I came home and told Dan, I think he'll be a good congressman. I'm going to vote for him. And, of course, I was going to vote for him, though, because I was a registered Republican. But Dan said, oh, well, he won't have a chance to win. He's running against a very popular Democrat, Ed Roush? Yeah. And he said, he's not going to win. I said, well, we'll wait and see. Well, he ended up winning.
Plus 76 is not an easy election year for the Republicans.
No, it was 76. Yeah. No, it wasn't.
No, but
so he wasn't upset,
right? For
sure. And we were both glad for that, too. But your question is, what did it feel like? I was a little reluctant to think of getting into politics when the opportunity presented itself because of Dan Quayle, because I'd grown up in a family. My dad was a businessman, and he owned his own business. And I first met Dan when he was reading the Wall Street Journal in the Wheaton Library.
On a Saturday.
And I thought, oh, this is a good sign. He must be interested in business too. Well, apparently it didn't work out that way. And Dan wanted to take the opportunity to work for Dan Quayle. And I saw it as kind of a dead end, because I thought Dan Quayle is young. He can be a congressman for as long as he wants to be, just about. And so Dan will run the district office, but what kind of future is there? Well, I guess I didn't understand politics very well, because it ended up being a great stepping stone for you, Dan, to end up running yourself when Dan decided to run for the Senate. So we're grateful to the Quayles. They paved the way for Dan Coats, and they made your future an easier road because of your partnership.
Yeah. But I had never thought that I would have the opportunity that came this way, because Dan Quayle was young. Yes, he'll be in the House for a long, long time and so forth. And when just halfway, just 2 years in as House of Representatives, one evening we were having dinner along with Jim Loomis, and Dan Quayle said, I've decided to run against Birch Bayh for Senate in 1980. And I was just shocked because Birch Bayh was just, everybody knew him and they liked him, and good senator and so forth. So I said, oh, that'll never work. I said, particularly because Governor Bowen, who was stepping down as governor, but had already said he wanted to run for the Senate, is running. And people here in Indiana loved him. He was just a grandfather of the people of Indiana, wonderful person. Unfortunately, his wife came down, the illness that took her life. And one day he basically said, I'm not going to be running for the Senate. I need to treat with my wife and so forth. All of a sudden I realized the newspaper in the morning, when I picked it up off the porch, Governor Bowen pulls out from the race. I said, oh my gosh, Dan Quayle was saying for months, if not Bowen, then Quayle. All of a sudden it became then Quayle. Yes. And then he turned to me and said, and you ought to think about running for my seat. And I was just in shock. I mean, I never even thought about that. I was going to just do 2 years or no more than 4 years with Dan Quayle as his district director. And then at that particular time, Mutual Security Life, which I joined up with after law school, and we moved to Fort Wayne, I thought that's our life, and we would settled in with church and all kinds of friends, and we thought okay, this is our life. All of a sudden, it's standing there, well, do you want to run for Congress? And my answer was yes. I'm not sure Marsha thought that was the best thing to do. That's not what she thought we would be. And from that point forward, things just God kept opening doors or shutting doors. This was not going to work. This one would work. We put our trust in Him to do what we believed He wanted us to do. Right. And that has carried us through all of our life up to this point right now.
Right. That's wonderful.
Marsha, politics can be a tough calling. People don't always fight fair and when it comes to politics. As a spouse, how did you find the strength and the grace to handle it when Dan was under political attack?
That question was asked a lot. I think my family prepared me well for it. When I told my folks that Dan had decided he was going to run for Congress, my mother said, oh, that is a dirty business. She said, I'm sorry to hear that. But when Dan asked my father to be his campaign chairman and manager, they moved from Scottsdale, Arizona to Fort Wayne to do it. So they were supportive, even though not so thrilled that we were going to have a political life, I don't think. But anyway, the family I grew up in was very competitive sports-wise. Everything we did, my folks would make it a competition between my brother and me and the four of us. We'd play tennis together, we'd play golf together, And win or lose, it was fun. And so I chose to see politics as a game and as a contest. Mm-hmm. And so each election, there was going to be a winner and there was going to be a loser. And either one, you accept it. But the criticisms, the negative ads that would come on, I saw it as part of the way it goes. That's just what it is. I did not take it personally, but we tried to avoid negative feedback from all of that. I don't know if we succeeded totally, but I guess the answer to your question is I wasn't very sensitive. I just took it as part of the whole game of politics.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I need to add here, though, the role of Martha that she played. Once the decision was made, she was all in, but calling all in with the family. We would go to parades and with our kids riding bikes and walking down the street with us. Marsha would be speaking to people, knocking on doors. If you look at the book, you see us walking down at a parade with our hand under our young son, Andrew. We made it a family business with Marsha's dad, who had never been in politics. He was the chairman. He's the one who put everything together.
Why'd you choose him, Dan? A political novice. Why'd you choose your father-in-law?
That's a good question to answer, but he's an extraordinary person. Details are, he can handle them very well. He just built right in and obviously reached out with help and so forth. The whole thing was family and door to door. It wasn't TV. You didn't see it much on television, but we're knocking on doors and people having coffees and families getting together, and church people were working with us.
Our little church, they all pitched in and took very active roles. And my father, although he had no political experience, he was a smart man. And when Orvis Beers, who was the Republican chairman in the 4th District at the time, it was back then the 4th District, called my dad to his office, his law office, and said, "Your son-in-law is a decent fellow, but he has no chance to win because in the primary he was running against two well-known Republican figures in that part of Indiana. And we'd only lived there 2 or 3 years at that time, so we were newcomers. When my dad didn't want to show any trepidation, so he said, well, Mr. Beers, we can buy name recognition with television advertising and media advertising, and we're going to win. And he got up and left. And turned out he was right, but it was partly because we were able to raise the money, partly because so many people pitched in, partly because it was a 3-way primary. If it had been just a 2-way primary, we probably would have lost. But that's the way I look at it.
Well, the people in Washington who were overseeing the candidates came out and said, "You're doing it all the wrong way. We need to get you on TV, we need to, so forth and so on." We said, Marsha's dad and we got together and said, "That's not working. We're going to go a different way. We're going to knock on doors. We're going to have people in each area of cities and so forth and so on that would bring their people together and so forth." It was just house to house and family to family and church people to church people. And
it was called the Caston Plan, and it was developed by a congressman from Wisconsin.
Right.
And Dan Quayle used it in his campaign. But it's breaking down the whole district into smaller segments.
Yeah, and going face to face with people.
Having the people,
Yes,
people meet
and
the
not
candidate.
counting on the commercial that might come on if you're watching TV at the evening or something like that. So it was. You saw all of us in the parades. You saw Marsha and Andrew, little Andrew, knocking on doors, and a lot of people say, "Okay, I'll take this block, or I'll take this area, or so forth." So it was just real one-to-one, and it worked.
It did.
So we've been talking about politics, which is obviously important, but I want to talk about something even more important than politics. As Alan noted, you were married in 1965, if I'm doing the math right, 60 years, which is remarkable. What's your secret for a long and happy marriage?
Forgiveness.
Tell me more about that.
Well, I think age and the years sort of wear down the rough edges. I think people are attracted to each other because they are opposites in some ways. Not always, but opposites do attract, I think. But then the very things that attract you to end up being the things that irritate you. So, but over the years, you learn to appreciate the differences and recognize that's an area Dan's better. He's better at that than I am, and vice versa. And so appreciating how we are different and how we have different opinions and accepting the differences. I think you get better at it as the years go by.
Well, that's what it was for us. I realized that not everything had to go my way. It was the better way to go. I respected what Marsha was thinking and how the two of us could blend that together. Even if we didn't agree with each other, we respected each other in terms of, and it turned out to be very helpful. Instead of, if you don't go my way, I don't want to go there. Marsha had to take care of the family while I was running around everywhere on this, and she'd done a wonderful job on it. But
Well, I'd much rather have been doing what I was doing than what you were doing.
yeah, if she was running, I probably couldn't have done what she has done for me. And I think every time she spoke, people would come up to me and say, "That's quite a woman." You know, you were very fortunate, and I was, and still are.
I'm hearing respect, understanding each other's roles, and forgiveness. Pretty good formula for a long marriage. Yeah, congratulations on 60
Got 60 years so far.
Absolutely.
We've decided to keep going.
Well,
Yeah,
good.
Very good. Marsha, you know, and Tim kind of touched on it when he talked about the rough and tumble of politics. Dan was known as a stalwart conservative, and sometimes that was used as a cudgel by his opponents. But during his years in Congress, that's what he was known as. But not everybody saw him in that light. And can you share with our listeners some folks who saw him maybe a little differently and some stories about that?
Well, when I first brought Dan home for an introduction to my parents, this is after we weren't engaged yet, but we were dating seriously at Wheaton. And Waukegan, where I grew up, is just north of Chicago, and Wheaton is west of Chicago. So we went up for a weekend, and that was the first time they met Dan. And we had a nice weekend. And when we got back, I called my folks right away. I said, "Well, what did you think?" And my mom said, "Well, he's okay, but he's too liberal." And so when our friends, our Democrat friends, would talk about you as being, oh man, dark ages conservative, I would remind them, no. In my family, he was too liberal.
It's very funny. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Senator and Marsha, and thank you, Alan. Sagamore Institute is an Indianapolis-based think tank focused on economic and educational opportunity, national defense, and civic health. To learn more about the issues discussed today, please visit sagamoreinstitute.org. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.